Hi class, welcome to Critical Thinking. I'm going to be making a lot of these videos throughout the quarter and discussing the topic. So this video, I wanted to start by just saying some general things about our general subject, philosophy, as this is a philosophy course. We can think about philosophy as philo, meaning a love, and Sophia, referring to wisdom. And so philosophy is a love of wisdom. And that's not terribly helpful in understanding what we do as philosophers. But there are some major fields of philosophy, one being metaphysics. And metaphysics is the study of reality. So it has to do with what our reality is like. So, big important metaphysical questions include, does God exist? Because if a world with God is very different from a world without God. So that's a huge topic in the philosophy of religion. Other big metaphysical questions include, do we have free will? Are all my actions determined by prior conditions and causal influences, or do I have this thing called a will that directs me to act in one way or another? So that's a big metaphysical question. In the realm of morality, a big metaphysical question is whether moral duties are real or whether they are invented by us. Is there a right way to be kind of etched into the fabric of reality? Or is right and wrong a human fabrication? So these are big metaphysical questions that have a lot of influence over our ways of being in the world. For instance, people who believe that God exists might feel that they have certain duties to uphold related to God. Another big metaphysical question is whether there is continued consciousness after death, if there's such a thing as a soul, for instance, that outlives the body. And that influences how people conduct themselves. A person living with the expectation that there is continued consciousness after death is probably going to live their life differently than someone who thinks that their time as a conscious human being is it. So these are big metaphysical questions. Another realm of philosophy is called epistemology. And epistemology is the study of knowledge. So we constantly talk about knowing X, knowing Y, and the epistemologist wants to dig down into that and ask us, what are the conditions for having knowledge? How do we come to have knowledge? One theory is that we come into the world a kind of blank slate. Our mind is empty of ideas, and then we use our senses. We go out and experience the world with our, seeing it and feeling it and so on. And then we start to gain ideas, and that's how our knowledge grows. But it makes our knowledge somewhat in question because we're limited to the kind of sense faculties that we have, our senses can at times give us false or misleading information. We might misinterpret, for instance, what is given to the senses. We might think we see a snake, but we actually see a garden hose, that kind of thing. Other philosophers believe that the senses are not a source of knowledge because of those mistakes that we can make when we base our knowledge on them, but rather look to the mind as having innate ideas that we can reflect upon and come to know. So this view says that the mind is not a blank slate upon being when you're born, but rather has certain ideas and notions, intuitions and so on that are sort of stitched into it from the start, and knowledge is about reflecting on those ideas that are already there. And then a condition for knowledge seems to be and this is going to relate to critical thinking, a condition for knowledge seems to be that we hold beliefs that are justified, okay, that have some reason behind them. And if we have a belief that has no reason behind it or has no justification, it might be a true belief, but we wouldn't count it as known, because that seems to be a condition for knowledge, is that we're able to back up our beliefs with evidence. Okay, so that's the theory, or that's the subject of epistemology. And then another subject is axiology, which has to do with values. And a very important field, probably the most popular, and the most of the work in this field is done in ethics. Okay, so what is a right action? What is a wrong action? What makes an action right? What makes an action wrong? What makes someone a good character? And what makes someone a vicious or have a poor character? These are questions that ethicists ask. And we will, in this class, end with some exploration of moral arguments. Okay, so we will dig into this a little bit. But another field of axiology is aesthetics, which also pertains to values. What makes something beautiful? If I see a landscape and I describe it as beautiful, the philosopher wants to know what qualities does it have that makes it beautiful? What constitutes beauty, and what makes something ugly, or drab or whatever. So this also pertains to values. Questions like what is a work of art are related to this field of study. So these are the big fields of philosophy. And then, what philosophers need to do, regardless of the field that they're working in, is they need to develop arguments. Okay, so the philosopher, they hold positions on these various topics, and they want to defend their position, and so they develop arguments. So a huge field related to this, a sort of fourth field in philosophy, you might say, is logic. Okay, we want to use good, sound reasoning as we develop our various arguments. And we also want to look at the arguments that have been created by others in a critical way. And logic gives us tools for thinking clearly and with consistency and analyzing the arguments that are presented to us, so that we won't end up adopting beliefs that are unjustified or are clearly wrong. And this is where critical thinking comes in. Okay, critical thinking. In this, I kind of put this out here, not as it's a little bit different than these fields of philosophy, and the difference is where these fields of philosophy dig into a particular subject about the reality that you exist in. Okay. And what your circumstance is as a human being. What logic and critical thinking do out here is provide tools for thinking, okay, about these subjects and others. Okay, so in this class, what we'll be doing is we'll be learning a bit about logic, which will help us think with more consistency, and we'll recognize, good arguments, ones where the beliefs that are upheld are well defended, and it will also help us recognize bad arguments, ones where the belief that's upheld with various reasons is on shaky grounds. And it's really not about coming to any particular conclusions about any of these fields, or any other fields, including science and mathematics and sociology and psychology and so on. It's not really about coming to a particular conclusion, but rather developing our skills in analyzing arguments and creating arguments of our own. So we'll be just better equipped to avoid weak and shaky arguments and false beliefs, and we'll be in a better position of adopting beliefs that are true, or at least if we disagree with a belief, we can recognize its merits when it's part of a good argument, and it'll give us some better tools for dealing with those good arguments that end up with conclusions that we disagree with. It'll just give us some tools for evaluating those arguments critically, and developing a more open mind, so that we can take arguments seriously that we might not have before, and so on. But ultimately, this class is about thinking about and dealing with arguments. All right. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. In the next page on this class in Canvas, we'll dig into what an argument is, and what it isn't. What we mean by argument in this class, and we'll start digging into the components of an argument and what makes an argument good and bad and so on.